Welcome back to the Nine Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Maya Smith. We are really, really close to the end of the PWHL season. Each team only has 3 games left, and we don't have all the playoff spots clinched. The gold plan has been activated. There's so much to talk about today. And because she has the honor of covering the first team to get eliminated this season, Silvia is back to join us. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm glad I don't have to do math. Not super excited about the elimination, but that math is just nowhere near me anymore.
Exactly. We were just talking before we hit record that, like, thankfully we have Dylan, who has kind of been like leading the charge with the elimination math on our side, so that none of the rest of us have to do math, because I deliberately went to school for public relations so I didn't have to do math ever again. And so, yes, you are free from the math, but now you have addition to do, hopefully, with Seattle winning some games, stacking up their points. We'll talk a little bit about what the gold plan is, but let's start with the number one at the nine, the top story of the week. So, our top story of the week is that the Seattle Torrent are the first team eliminated from playoff contention. And the story I'm referencing here, Silvia actually wrote. You'll find it on the 9sports.com. But last night, when we're recording this, so Tuesday night, the Torrent were in Vancouver for the second time this season. They actually haven't seen each other for a while. To essentially, the odds were win and you keep going for both teams. If Seattle had won in overtime, they actually would have knocked both teams out, which I think some people were kind of rooting for the chaos of that. But in the end, Vancouver won 4-1 and eliminated Seattle from playoff contention. Vancouver still lives to see another day there. They chased Corinne Schroeder. So CJ Jackson got their first minutes as a Torrent, which I personally was very excited to see. And honestly, Seattle had a huge third period. I don't believe that CJ was scored on at all, and they really held it down there. But Seattle just couldn't beat Emmerich Mashmeyer with the time that they had left. And yeah, so they are in the gold plan now, which I'll just give a little quick explainer of what that is in case people are listening and they don't know. So in the PWHL, it's kind of the anti-tanking method. So essentially, once you get officially eliminated, any wins that you get after that period, those points get added up, and the teams that have all been eliminated from the playoffs, those points get totaled up, and whoever has the most points after being eliminated automatically gets that first overall pick. So you want to win after you get eliminated. You do not want to lose. And last night, I realized and was helped by some of our other coworkers in realizing that we haven't really seen the gold plan happen, other than New York has been the only team that up to this point that has been eliminated in the past 2 seasons. And then the last playoff spots took so long to get nailed down that no other teams were eliminated before the end of the regular season. So New York just got the points. So this year, it's really looking like we probably will see at least one other team join Seattle. So I think it will be quite exciting. But let's talk about last night's game, Sylvia. How did we get to being on the verge of elimination, and then what happened last night?
Yeah, I mean, last night, like you said, I wrote a little bit about this. Last night's game was really like a summary of the Torrents like season, right? You have a team, and I mean, you were there. They were just the Torrent have this like really beautiful relationship with the boards. They love the boards. They love to be at the boards, and that has, and I feel like other teams have really like focused in on that because they keep them to the outside. That really happened. Like that was a big part of the Goldeneye strategy. Like the first period, once they scored that first goal, I think it was Sarah Nurse scored that first goal. It was kind of just like how much can we just like stay on Corey Schroeder? And yeah, they scored 4-0. Michaela Grant Mentis was able to get her goal in there. Beautiful goal, honestly. I think Michaela, she's got this whole thing where like she has these beautiful flashy goals, and when we're able to get like these flashes of depth scoring from the Torrent, it's usually that third line. which is again one of the issues is that we just don't have a lot of depth scoring, and we do. It's just that line. So that was again another thing that it's been consistent to the season. Another part, it was an away game. The Torrent have a total of 7 points on away games. That's like I think it's one loss, one win. No, sorry, it's one win, one overtime win, one overtime loss. Like I think once you start stacking those things, once you start talking about like their defense, we have Corey Schroeder, we have Hannah Murphy, we have some incredible goalies. CJ got their start, but this like consistent lack of defense, just like a total breakdown of the moment that it feels a lot of the times that the moment the power play goes wrong for the Torrent, everything goes wrong after that. And we really did see that. And then you mentioned that third period, like, yeah, there was some great chances in that third period. A lot of them hit post, unfortunately, and just nothing came out of it. And again, that's like a consistent thing. It's, players keep them to the outside. When they get those chances, they just don't go in. And I don't think it's a case of luck like some other teams we know in the league, but it's also like, it's a case of it, at least it feels. And I know yesterday Steve O'Rourke said in the broadcast, the team on the bench was very quiet and the team on the ice was very quiet. It almost feels like the moment something goes wrong, just lack of confidence. It feels like everything shuts down, and that's not ideal.
Yeah, and we also saw that last night. I was mid typing about Anna Meixner's first goal with the Vancouver Goldeneyes, and Maddie Samaskevich went out and scored. And like, it is really rare that Vancouver scores 4 goals in a game, but it is more rare that they are just creating that much output all at the same time. And it was really interesting to see the kind of like shot layout that they have on the website, because normally the Goldeneyes are not in the slot. They are shooting from far out. They have a very similar issue to Seattle in that case, but they were able to get to the net. They were able to get those high value chances. And even though they don't tend to score very much, they do have goal scorers who can score when they are given the opportunity. And they were definitely given the opportunity last night. And I mean, you and I were texting during the game that like Corinne Schroeder, most of those goals were not her fault. It wasn't really her fault that she got chased from the net, but the defensive breakdown in front of her was just, yeah, something that I think we haven't really seen from other teams this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of the times what'll happen, the defensive pairings don't get moved around very often. I think there was some movement when there were some injuries, but there's just not a lot of movement there. I think a lot of the time what happens is this like scramble, right? Like there, and you'll see it. I think we saw it like there's like the second goal. There's like this scramble to protect the goalie that just never happens. We see a lot of players on their stomachs. We see a lot of players kind of throwing themselves, and it doesn't work. And I think we'll talk a little bit about this later, but like I'm really excited to see how the team is able to experiment now that there's no like the only pressure is win. So how can we experiment in order to win?
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was interesting last night in the post-game press conference. I was trying to kind of pull out a storyline of, you're about to face the Goldeneyes again, literally on Saturday, which we're going to talk about here in a second. What can you do differently? And I was kind of shut down by Alex Carpenter, who basically just said, we don't really care what the Goldeneyes are doing. We're focusing on our game. But I do think that's interesting because, I mean, personally, I'm sure they're reviewing the tape. I'm sure she just didn't want to say anything about it. But when you do have a chance to get those 3 points that could pretty much cement you almost that first overall pick, like, you do have to take into consideration some of the things that went wrong in this game and assume that the Goldeneyes are going to come out about the same or worse because they're on the road. So I thought that was interesting. You also had me ask Steve O'Rourke a question about line management. We know Hannah Bilka's injured, but Jenna Buglioni, who is one of their, if not their top pick in the draft, I don't exactly remember.
Pick, yeah.
Yeah, their first pick. She's been out of the lineup a bit, and His answer was basically like, we reevaluate the lineups after every game. Everybody is eligible to get in. And I think it will be interesting to see if they do actually make some changes now that they don't have the playoffs on the line. I couldn't really get a feel from him about how willing he was to do that.
Yeah, and honestly, that's not a what's the phrase? Unusual
Yeah,
for a head
atypical.
coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, not very like it, getting those answers around the lineup. I know when I last asked him about Jenna, a big thing was earlier in the season, Jenna had Buglione had an injury. I think it was a concussion, if I remember correctly. And O'Rourke talked about like and I'm paraphrasing here. I have the actual quote somewhere on Twitter, but basically they felt like they didn't manage her return as correctly
Mhm.
as possible, and they were working on her to get her speed up, right? And again, I feel like you get to practice so much. This is like you're coming back home. You're going to be home the last 3 games. What does it look like for you to evaluate her then? And again, so that's where like the experimenting, I feel like this is the perfect moment to experiment with what does actual speed look like for the Torrent? Because overall, Torrent are, I mean, they're fast, but they're not, the fastest team. So what does
Mhm.
it actually mean to have Buglione speed up? What does speed look like for the Torrent is something I would love to see coming into like these next 3 games.
Yeah, and then what and also, like, looking ahead to next season, like, it's difficult for we talked about the GM and the coach of the Vancouver Goldeneyes at practice on Monday. It's so hard for anybody to talk about roster management going into next season because we still don't know what's going on with the expansion teams. If there's going to be an expansion, if there isn't, how many teams there's going to be, what the rules are going to be. But you have to think that you want to know where all of your pieces stand as you do go into that. Because if Jenna Buglioni is your franchise player moving forward, you're going to have to protect her. Or maybe we haven't seen her enough all season that nobody will want to take her. But I feel like it would be good for them to know where they actually stand before the end of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a question with probably all of our rookies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think we had one rookie with like a point up until 3 games ago. Now we have three. Like the Torrent have really focused on, for good reason. We have some incredible Olympians on the team. They're, our top lines, but like just being able to see some of these players, Lindy Lobdell had an incredible game. So like being able to see some of these players get like their minutes and their time. Again, going back to what you said, like who do you protect, and like have teams seen enough of these players to want to take them at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So next game, we kind of in within the Ice Garden had been kind of calling it the Harvey Bowl because depending on how things had worked out on Tuesday night, this could have been the first game of the gold plan for both teams. Vancouver and Seattle will be playing in Seattle. I believe this is Vancouver's first time going to Seattle this season,
Mhm.
actually. Um, and so it looked like it could be like, whoever takes these 3 points, they may be the person who gets KK Harvey, who we are all generally assuming is going to go first overall. I do want to ask you about her. Now it's looking like it's not going to be that way. It might be that Vancouver can be eliminated by a Seattle win, in which case Seattle would get 3 points that Vancouver doesn't have in the gold plan. Vancouver needs another win. So if they do that, then Seattle doesn't get those 3 points in the gold plan. It is still a very important game, even if it's not necessarily a direct race for Caroline Harvey. First, let's talk about how does Seattle capture that first overall pick? Like, what do they need to, aside from win, how can they make sure that they're putting their best foot forward as a team that hasn't won that much this season?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two things, and I was thinking about this earlier because it's two sides of honestly the Seattle Torrent. We have the Seattle Torrent who win at home. and they're going to be at home for these incredibly three
Mm-hmm.
important games. We have, the Torrent, when after games, they very much credit it to like the fans and the fan experience and being cheered for and all of this stuff. So obviously they have that home advantage, right? So that'll help. Looking at the teams that are coming up, they've only won one game against all three teams combined.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a game against Montreal. So like that's where it gets kind of murky, where like we as people who've been watching the Seattle Torrent, we expect the win to an extent because it's a home game. We know that they win at home. But when you think about, like it's the Frost and it's Montreal and it's like teams with this elite play who have shown to already beat Seattle, and even at home. In fact, they beat Seattle at home. It becomes like, again, it's like where's the we're gonna I guess we're going to see where the Seattle come to, like in the middle. Like this is going to be we have to the spectrum of the Seattle Torrent. We win at home versus we have lost against these teams. This is our middle. This is who the Seattle Torrent are. So like, going back to your question, what do they do to win? We don't know because we haven't seen it yet. We generally have not seen this team win against these teams.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I saw some complaints on Twitter like, why did the league saddle the worst team in the league with facing Montreal and Boston, or Montreal and Minnesota at the end of the season? Obviously, when the league scheduled the season, they didn't know that the Torrent and the Goldeneyes were going to be the worst two teams, but those teams have basically identical schedules. The Goldeneyes will be back home after playing Seattle, and they'll face Montreal and Minnesota as well, which honestly, like, they have about a same level of record against those teams. So really, it does set up both teams for potentially just both having problems. I don't know what the league would do if neither team got any points in the gold plan. I'm sure there's a
that would generally be beautiful. I think that would generally be beautiful. Like, I like what more like because I like you said, I think at the beginning of the season, there was, we did predictions and a lot of people were like, well, obviously the Golden Knights are going to win the Walter Cup. Like they have this
I think I did.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about this like within ourselves. I'm going to take the time to brag that I did say that the Seattle Torrent would not win. So yes,
you knew.
Thank you. But like, yeah, it does become of like, there was so much pressure on these teams too, to like, I'm going to talk about Vancouver. There was so much pressure on Vancouver to win the Walter Cup. I generally think it would be incredible to see how the league handles its expansion just kind of flop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it also is like, we don't have any idea where the league is at with the future expansion, but I know that I've heard from other journalists and other fans, like, if you look at the experiment this year, how can you, like, obviously the PWHL is a single ownership league, so they don't have to entice buyers to buy into the league, but how do you change, I guess, how do you take this experiment and say, we're going to add 2 to 4 teams and it's going to be different? There has to be some kind of change, I think. And I don't really know what the solution is, because I would have told you if Vancouver and Seattle were the top 2 teams in the league, I would have told you need to let the teams protect more players. You need to like kind of crack down on that. But now we know that it doesn't really matter who you have. It matters about chemistry, and it matters about the personnel that you bring in, and it matters, maybe we'll maybe talk about this in a sec, but it maybe matters about travel and location and all of these things that are really, really difficult to control. So yeah, it would definitely be, I think, the most interesting scenario if both teams were just at the bottom with no gold plan points. If Seattle does get some points, they finish in the top, do you see Caroline Harvey as being their choice in the draft? Do you think because of expansion details not yet being released, we don't really know? Or do you think it's just like they would be stupid to not take her?
I mean, I'm not gonna pretend to have paid attention to a lot of the NCAA. Honestly, this is like my first year where I've like really dug in. Um,
Same.
I think yes, to an extent, yes, they would be dumb not to, right? You want a player like that. But I
Mhm.
also know because I know there's been I've been like talking to some fans, just looking at what they've been saying. I know there's been a lot of excitement around Layla Edwards as well. I think that Hillary Knight connection does a really
Mhm.
good like kind of sets us up for that as well. And Layla Edwards, the Seattle Torrent, something that I've really loved about covering the team and just being around the team, they have done an incredible job of the community outreach. And Layla Edwards is also like
Mhm.
incredibly connected to that aspect of the game. So I would love to see what comes out of like Layla Edwards being in Seattle. But yeah, I mean, we're calling it the Harvey Bowl for a reason, right? Like if you are in that spot, it would be almost nonsensical to not pick her first.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I think you make a really good point. Like she isn't the only option, and one of the things that we were kind of talking about with Kara Gardner Mori, who's the Goldeneyes GM on Monday, is the first 10 picks of that draft are extremely strong. It is like, and we keep getting more and more players from the SDHL that are declaring that they're going to go enter the draft. Like, picking whoever you take first, you're likely going to get a franchise player out of it. But whether or not you want a defender, a forward who also plays defense, how you want them to fit in with your team, like we've seen this season that chemistry really matters. So that's a great point. I do just want to quickly touch on one of the hot button topics, um, travel.
Mm.
So last week in Edmonton, Vancouver coach Brian Idalski. Now, I was in the room for this, and I think that one of the things that was playing a factor that some people are missing is that it was the end of an 18-day road trip. Um, they had just lost 5-0 to the Fleet. They were
Mhm.
not in a city that is familiar to them. But he kind of said, like, clearly travel is one of the biggest issues about the expansion teams. Only the expansion teams are bad, and it's because we've had to travel. And everybody kind of ran with that story. You had people who were like, that is stupid. I can't believe that you would say that. You had people who were like, he's right and he should say it. He and also some of the Goldeneyes players kind of walked that back at the media availability on Monday. The players seem to really enjoy being on the road with their teammates. But then in the post game last night, Steve O'Rourke kind of hinted at the fact that it doesn't really matter and they don't make excuses about their travel. So I'm interested to know what you think about this idea of, is travel like really that big of a factor, and is it the reason that we're seeing the problems we're seeing with expansion?
I mean, so this is also a question that I asked one of the East Coast teams early on in the season when they came out to their first West Coast like trip. Obviously that's very different. There's only two teams out here. But I do remember, and I don't remember what team I asked, but I do remember the coach saying something like, we come in pretty early. There's time between like games. It seems like that's also how the
Mm-hmm.
West Coast teams like they come in a
I
few
think
days.
so.
They go in, yeah, they fly in a few days early. They have some time to settle. Um, I also did see those conversations that you're referring to on Twitter. I know some fans were talking about like the CBA and the accommodations and the fact that
Mm-hmm.
players are flying like commercial things like that. So I think it's travel, yes, and the fact that a lot of the things are not up to standard, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
what a pro athlete needs to be able to succeed. So I almost wonder, like, yeah, like it makes sense where O'Rourke would be like, well, we're not going to put up excuses. Yeah, your team just lost. You're not gonna say, oh, it's the travel. Your team lost in the West Coast. Also, you just got eliminated. Like I
Mm-hmm.
almost wonder if it was like an emotional reaction there, but
Totally.
I have wondered like how has the travel impacted. I know I talked to a player early on in the year who was like, the travel has actually been really helpful for us to like come together as a team. We get to do a
Mhm.
lot of cool things. We get to like experience a lot of cool things together. I don't know if like you follow the players on social media, you see a lot of those pictures that they post. So I think it's like a twofold thing too. Like there is that ability to become tighter, to experience things together, for that chemistry to build. But yeah, I can't imagine that that's not incredibly tiring to be flying commercial to get, I think it's like, to get those hotel rooms like 15 miles, at least 15 miles away from the rink or something, like no, or no more
Yeah.
than 15 miles away from the practice rink. Like, yeah, that has to compound eventually.
Absolutely. And I think like my kind of feeling is, if the league wants to be taken seriously as a professional league, then that kind of excuse that many other professional teams in other professional leagues also travel at some point you just have to realize that these are pro athletes. But I think you do make a really good point that they're not necessarily being set up for success in the way that other athletes are. Like I think the WNBA only recently managed to
Mm-hmm.
say that they get to fly chartered planes now, but it's a very different experience traveling. I believe it says window or aisle seat on, your regular flight that any of the rest of us would be on, in at least a 2-star hotel. Like that's very different travel than chartered plane, nice hotel right at the rink.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something that is, as you said, like it's worth the discussion on, and there's probably ways that it can be improved in the future, but it's definitely, I don't think it can be the only thing that the league and these teams point to at the end of the season as being the reason that Vancouver and Seattle were maybe less successful.
Yeah, and
Um,
I also
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I also think like if that's going to be the consistent issue, then what's the point of expansion?
Mhm,
Right? Like at that rate, then just leave the teams how it is. Because like if we don't want teams to travel, like then what's the point?
mhm,
Want these, the reason that that, and just hockey as a general, the reason that hockey is nation and across North America is because we're able to see this talent across North America. If the complaint is always going to be like, oh, West Coast teams suck because it's too long of a flight, okay, then let's just keep it on the East Coast. I like
yeah.
there, yeah, that's your only solution.
Yeah, very true. Unless you can manage to build it up that you kind of segment the leagues, but I don't know that that really solves the issue either, because then you just see the same 2 or 3 teams every week, and that's, we learned from the pandemic and the NHL situation that that's really not that fun. So, yeah, definitely something for them to consider, for the league to consider as they go forward. Um, there actually are other teams in this league, despite what you may think from this podcast episode. Um, so, just a quick little check in on where things are at. We're recording this on Wednesday night after the games finished today. New York beat Toronto, and Boston once again beat Minnesota. So, Montreal is in first. Um, they have not clinched that spot. They're only 1 point ahead of Boston. And then we also have Minnesota. Those 3 teams have been locked in for a little bit. The race between, it is technically still between 4 teams, but it essentially is between 3 teams for that final spot. Ottawa has it right now. New York and Toronto are tied now after New York's win, and then we have Vancouver and Seattle, with Seattle being officially eliminated. We're almost out of time, but I want to know if you're the team that finishes first, you get to choose your opponent. Let's assume you want to take that 4th spot since they're taking their sweet time clinching it. Which of those 3 teams would you want to see, if you're that first place team? Who do you want to play?
Honestly, and I'm gonna take a talking point that I've seen just talked around a lot. I would take the Sirens. I think the Sirens are like, I want success for them. They're like a distant cousin to me, you know? I just want the best for them. And part of that best is, I do want to see them in the playoffs, and I want to see them go up against top team, just to see what does it look like to be like I know we have the regular season. I know we've seen them play Montreal before, or whatever top with the top team. But like I also want the fans to experience that. I mean, we watched everybody watched the game at MSG. I can't imagine that excitement again. But yeah, I'd go with New York because again, distant cousins. I care for them. I check up on them every once in a while. We're just not that close.
Is it because they also wear teal?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think it would be great for that organization if they can get into the playoffs, but I also think you do take the chance on a team that hasn't made the playoffs in the last 2 years and has no playoff experience.
Mhm.
But as we've seen, the playoffs are a completely different ball game, so we'll have to see. Let's talk about top shelf predictions. Jeremy predicted last week that Vancouver and Seattle would both be eliminated by the time we recorded this. That's not the case. He was half right. So what is your top shelf prediction for something that happens between now and next episode?
My top. Let's see. I'm thinking. Let me think. I'm gonna keep it to the Seattle Torrent because
Okay.
it's a Seattle Torrent heavy episode. Um, I think my prediction is the Torrent are gonna go. They're gonna win 2 games. What games I don't know. What games they're gonna be I don't know. But I think that they're gonna win 2 games, and the loss is gonna be devastating. It's gonna be a shutout. And
Mm,
we're gonna see tears all everywhere on the timeline, on the Reddit, on the Seattle Torrent Facebook. And I say all this with all the love, but I love how dramatic Seattle Torrent fans are, and I think this would be actually a really good ending for the season for this team.
all right. I like it. We'll see what happens. Where can people find you outside of this podcast?
People can find me on Twitter at Badnans. I am consistently tweeting about the Torrent and clipping games and tweeting about the Torrent.
Yeah, and you have great clips from the game, so definitely give Sylvia a follow. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the general listeners for being here. If you aren't already subscribed or following, depending on what platform you're listening to, we have full-length episodes like this 3 times a week with soccer, basketball, and hockey. We also have the Daily Show. If you just want that 5 minutes of women's sports as you're heading to work, and if you are able to, please support the9sports.com with a subscription so you can read the work of our fantastic colleagues. The WNBA is insane right now, so
Yes.
definitely check out all the work that they're putting in. And we'll have PWHL and women's hockey content all throughout the offseason, playoffs, draft, expansion, whatever happens. So definitely check that out. Thanks for being here, Sylvia.
Thank you.